Good afternoon, Senators. Prior to the lunch break suspension, we were at the second reading, and we were debating a bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Al Ray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs, and related purposes. I presume that we are now ready to continue. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, it is good to be here, back in our space, and I would like to echo your sentiments of gratitude to the Ministry of Works and all others involved in the renovation of this honorable place. I'd also like to formally wish my colleagues here in the Senate a happy New Year, all of them, and all the best to you and your families for 2025. I'd like to also adopt your expressions of appreciation to our dear chaplain, who keeps us all spiritually aligned from session to session. And I appreciate her devotion this morning on love and leadership, and I am really grateful for the effort she puts into preparing for us here. Madam President, I would like to extend my heartfelt sympathy to all families who have lost loved ones since we've met in this place. I'd particularly like to extend condolences to the family of the late Ludell Theophilus, former president of the Women's Association, and the family of the late Louise Bosfield, meritorious council member of the Free National Movement. May they rest in peace. Madam President, it's February, one of my favorite months of the year. Not everyone has the privilege of being born in February, and I empathize with you, but February is just a beautiful month. And it's the month the world pauses to recognize as Heart Month, Madam President. And we know that cardiovascular disease is one of the leading causes of death in the Bahamas, and that's driven by high rates of hypertension and diabetes and other non-communicable diseases that we're faced with. And too many of our loved ones suffer from preventable heart-related illnesses. And so we must take action, Madam President, individually and as a nation. So small lifestyle changes like regular exercise, healthier eating, and routine checkups can save lives. But systemic change is also necessary. And so we need to drive stronger public health initiatives to address the root cause of NCDs and promote heart health for all Bahamians. And so I encourage everyone to join the fight against heart disease this month. Support Heart Month by buying a pin. You can attend the ball this coming Saturday, volunteer, or simply spread awareness, Madam President, because together I believe that we can build a healthier Bahamas. I'd also like to pause, Madam President, and to invite everyone to the monthly meetings of the Seabreeze constituency that are held on the last Monday of each month, which happens to fall on Monday, the 24th day of February this month at 7 p.m. at Sadie Curtis. And so the focus on the 24th is CPR training and first aid care, which is going to be led by Levada Adderley, and you don't want to miss it. All are welcome. Senator Picksock, you can come too. You're welcome. Madam President, I rise to contribute on the Foreign Service Bill 2024 and Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill 2024. Madam President, diplomatic relations are very important, which we've established here today. Our former Foreign Affairs Minister has established, and it's existed from the beginning of time. Even in the biblical account, the wise men sought counsel on their journey to find the king, Madam President. And so I fully acknowledge the importance of diplomacy and international engagement, Madam President, but what I cannot support is what seems to be the haphazard and seemingly unstructured approach to the establishment of new diplomatic missions abroad. There must be clear, well-defined parameters, a strategic framework, and transparency in decision-making, especially, Madam President, when public funds are being utilized. And so Since the current administration took office, we have seen the establishment of multiple new foreign missions.
Excellent.
Without any publicly outlined strategy or justification, Madam President. And I'm so happy that they agree that there's not been any, clearly outlined strategy or justification. And so, Madam President, since we had the New Day governance, we saw the New Day governance with a mission here and a mission there, here a mission, there a mission, everywhere a mission, Madam President. New missions have been opened in Los Angeles and Toronto, with missions set to expand in Jamaica and Trinidad, alongside an embassy in Abu Dhabi, Madam President. And this raises a number of important concerns for me, Madam President, concerns as a Bahamian citizen. For example, why 5 missions in the United States? We already maintain an embassy, a consulate, and permanent mission to the OAS in Washington. We have a consulate in New York, a consulate in Miami, a consulate in Atlanta, and now a consulate in Los Angeles, Madam President. Plus honorary consuls in Chicago, one in Minnesota, and at some point there was one in Texas. So the strategic objectives need to be clarified, Madam President. Are these locations, since you'd like to clarify, are they selected based on regional necessity? Is it because of population density of Bahamians? Can you lay those numbers? Is it trade and investment opportunities or simply political preference? Okay, Madam President, what data supported the decision to establish a mission in LA? Not that I object. I have a cousin who's living and working there. But how many Bahamians reside there other than my cousin, Madam President? How many Bahamians conduct business there? No, tell us, okay? That would justify a full-fledged consulate. Nobody's saying we have a problem with any sort of diplomacy with Los Angeles. But I just want to know what the strategy is. Are we aiming for 50 missions across the United States? It's just questions.
Point of order.
Do you have answers to the questions?
No. I can't take any more of this. Madam, yeah. No.
Parliamentary.
Listen, just a point of clarification, Madam President. When these things are decided upon,
Do you have? Yeah.
because I think a misleading sort of,
What is your, you said your
What are
point
they
of order?
misleading?
the point of order is she's misleading,
Okay, how so?
right?
I stated facts.
That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying, Madam President, is, can you just let me finish, please?
Sure, go ahead, I'm listening.
Is when decisions are made, they are decided based on facts, okay?
So lay them.
And
Let him finish.
and so unless she has the facts to prove, because she's questioning, right? If she has no evidence or factual basis,
Question?
right,
Question,
then
I'm
she
not
should
speaking.
she should not be
I'm asking questions.
speaking inaccuracies.
I'm not speaking. Everything I told you.
Come on, you know better.
Madam
Come on.
President.
Don't tarnish your lawyer.
Madam President.
Senator.
Yes,
know
ma'am.
better than that.
I ask questions.
Senator, can you please proceed and speak to the chair? Just speak.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
I was hoping I'd get information. So, Madam President, all I'm doing is trying to understand on behalf of the Bahamian people what's happening, Madam President. For example, why now for Jamaica and Trinidad? I have no objections. I went to school in Jamaica myself. I went to grad school there. I have friends who went to Jamaica, to Trinidad, people who live there. But all I want to know, Madam President, is what specific needs warrant opening missions there in these particular Caribbean nations at this time. Is there data, is there quantifiable data that can be presented here to help clarify my questions? Is there a valid rationale for having 2 separate missions, Madam President? Or could one have served both jurisdictions effectively? I tell you, I worked at a global bank, Madam President, and even global banking institutions have streamlined their regional operations into a single hub. Yet this administration expanding with little clarity on the necessity. Again, I have no challenge with it, Madam President, but the Bahamian people who fund these operations deserve transparency regarding the cost and expected benefits and exactly what data is driving these decisions. Perhaps it's there, and perhaps it does exist, but we deserve to know. Madam President, the embassy in in the UAE? Is it justifiable? What are the strategic goals behind establishing an embassy in the United Arab Emirates? My colleague is in opposition right now, and so I hope that one of the senators whose party is the administration will be able to tell us whether or not there's a significant trade or diplomatic relationship that necessitates this particular investment. Is there a compelling reason why the administration is going to do this and just hasn't shared it with the public? Madam President, all I'm saying is that there appears to be no published strategy guiding these diplomatic expansions. That's all I'm saying. Instead, we see missions being established with vague explanations about protecting Bahamians and furthering economic interests. Broad, generic statements that do not provide clarity and measurable objectives, Madam President. Furthermore, the lack of coordination in digital, I'll tell you, it really exasperates the inefficiency. So some missions have independent websites instead of a unified platform under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'll tell you, as a country, we're one country. So no matter where we have missions, it's still the Bahamas. And so multiple sites, that causes increase in cost for domain registration. You have to have security for all these different sites and maintenance, and also dilutes the national brand. And so we have to consider, Madam President, moving toward just a unified site as one country, because our foreign missions should operate in a cohesive and efficient manner, maximizing resources rather than duplicating expenses. Good Senator. And Madam President, while we are witnessing the unchecked expansion of foreign missions, we must ask ourselves, what is the opportunity cost? What pressing domestic issues could be addressed with the same funds currently being allocated to sustaining a bloated foreign service? Madam President, many of our clinics on the Family Islands lack adequate medical equipment and staffing, and that's just a fact. Basic needs. I talk to people all the time. Basic medicines out of stock on the Family Islands. How many lives could be saved or even improved if those funds, some of them, were redirected to strengthening our healthcare system? What about our schools that are in desperate need of upgraded facilities? More teachers, for sure. We see it in the news. And enhanced resources to support students, especially those with special needs and from underprivileged backgrounds. Madam President, like we would say in the local colloquial way, when it comes to social services, I wouldn't even shout, because Bahamians struggling with the rising cost of living, particularly the elderly and disabled, require additional support services. So investing in social programs would have a direct and tangible impact on the lives of our citizens. We talk about climate change, but given our vulnerability to hurricanes, Madam President, we should be prioritizing investments in resilient infrastructure as well, an emergency response system. And so there's a time for everything, like Ecclesiastes says. And my question is, right now, with all of our priorities as a nation, is now the time for expanded missions? So it's not a question, Madam President, of whether foreign relations matter. Of course they do, and we've established that. But it is a question of priorities. At a time when our people are facing real struggles, should we be expanding embassies and consulates in areas where there's no demonstrated need or clearly quantifiable data to drive it? Madam President, exactly 1 year ago, we witnessed a grand ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Los Angeles office. The government excels. I have to commend them on ribbon-cutting and announcements and, groundbreaking. They're pretty good at that. But what we're missing is measurable outcomes. So what specific trade and investment opportunities have been generated by this office over the 12-month period? How many Bahamians have benefited from its services? What are the performance indicators so we can know what's being used to assess the success of these new missions? Madam President, for those missions without an online presence, like the LA office, how do Bahamians and potential investors connect with them? How do you find anyone now if you don't have a clear digital presence on the web? So accessibility and efficiency should be a priority, Madam President, not an afterthought. And so, Madam President, what we demand is accountability and strategic planning in the management of our foreign affairs, and I do not think that's too much to ask, because politicians work for the people, not the other way around. If there is a clear rationale for these new missions, let it be known and communicated transparently. Until then, Madam President, I remain deeply concerned about the reckless expansion of diplomatic posts without justifiable need, clear strategic direction, or public accountability. Madam President, the new day is here, like I said. Mission here and a mission there. Here a mission, there a mission, everywhere a mission. It is time for us to reassess our priorities, Madam President. The people of the Bahamas deserve better. Our resources must be allocated where they will have the most impact, addressing the real and urgent needs of our citizens at home, because our resources are not, regrettably, limitless. Madam President, I'd like to take a moment to recognize some pioneers in foreign affairs in our country. And I will tell you, it is always a challenge when you start to name names. You can't do it without the risk of leaving someone out. But some individuals have undeniably shaped the Bahamas' presence on the global stage. Individuals, Madam President, like Dr. Davidson Hepburn, who rose from Cat Island to international diplomacy, serving as the president of UNESCO's General Conference, an achievement that brought prestige not only to him, Madam President, but to the entire region. Madam President, Albie Johnson, a distinguished attorney, was the first Bahamian ambassador to the U.S. and the UN, establishing the nation's diplomatic footprint in Washington, D.C. just months, mere months, after independence. Then the late George Stewart and Ambassador Joshua Sayers provided steady leadership at separate times at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, shaping policy and strengthening the Bahamas' global engagements. Then there was Missouri, Sherman Peter, who we've heard about, who held key positions across international organizations from CARICOM to the United Nations, earning recognition for her expertise and leadership. Madam President, lest we forget, the Right Honorable Dame Janet Bostwick, a true pioneer with many firsts as a woman in our Commonwealth. Among them, she became the first woman to serve as the Minister of Foreign Affairs in 1995. And Madam President, in recognizing Dame Janet's contributions, it naturally leads me to a broader conversation about protecting and empowering women and girls, an issue that remains just as important today as it was back then. Even as we debate, Madam President, the allocation of resources abroad, we must not turn a blind eye to the injustices and systemic failures occurring at home. The value of women and girls in our society cannot be measured in mere words. It must be reflected in our policies, our legal system, and the enforcement of laws meant to protect them. Recently, we witnessed two deeply troubling cases that call into question the level of protection afforded to women and girls in this country. A father who molested his 3-year-old twin daughters was sentenced to a mere 5 years. Meanwhile, a police officer who solicited sex from a minor was only fined. Imagine that. These sentences, Madam President, do not reflect the severity of these crimes. They do not reflect the trauma inflicted on victims, and they do not reflect justice. We must ask ourselves, what message are we sending to perpetrators? What message are we sending to victims? Are we telling them that their pain is insignificant, that their suffering is negotiable, that justice is reserved for those who can afford it? As a nation, Madam President, we cannot claim to be progressing if we are unwilling to hold predators accountable. Our justice system must serve as a deterrent, not as a revolving door for those who violate the most vulnerable among us. And I am happy that people like Senator Pickstock, who has a daughter, can identify with what I'm saying. And so, Madam President, we must strengthen our laws, enforce harsher penalties, and provide greater support for victims. Anything less is a betrayal of our duty to protect our people. Women and girls are not disposable. Our safety and well-being must be non-negotiable, and the resources we allocate must reflect not only our national priorities, but also our values. Our justice system must do better, Madam President. We must do better. And Madam President, as I close, I must remind parents that they ought to love their children. And there's nothing loving about incest. We must love our children and our women. We must love each other, Madam President, as Bahamian citizens and residents. And on that note, I would like to wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day this coming Friday. May we embrace the true essence of love as outlined in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love that is patient, kind, selfless, and enduring. Beyond the flowers and the chocolates, let us embody love in our actions, showing compassion, forgiveness, and generosity to those around us. Love is not just a feeling, Madam President. It is a choice we make every single day. And let us choose love in all we do. Madam President, may God bless the next Prime Minister and leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition, the Honorable Michael C. Pintar. Madam President, may God, thank you. Madam President, may God bless, I like that y'all getting a little antsy. You see it coming. May God bless our outgoing Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis. Madam President, may God bless the current cabinet and the cabinet in waiting. Madam President, may God bless the members of Parliament who are keeping our seats warm low these 5 years. Madam President, may God bless every citizen and resident across our archipelago, from Grand Bahama in the north to Anagua in the south, and every island, rock, and key in between. God bless us, and God bless our beloved Commonwealth, henceforth, now and forever. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Honorable Maxine Seymour for your contribution. The chair recognizes Senator Honorable Barry Griffin.
Madam President, I know we hit the table in here, but are we allowed to give a round of applause for the great performance just now? Just a brief point of order. I didn't want to interrupt the senator, but she used the phrase unchecked expansion of our missions. I just wanted to address that because it's misleading and it's untrue. Just wanted to confirm that all of these decisions in terms of how missions are established go through the official cabinet process, as she would know. And so it isn't an unchecked expansion. Cabinet, following its protocols, following the goals of the cabinet, would approve each and every mission, approve the staff at the mission, approve the budget of the mission, approve lease agreements signed for premises. And so it isn't an unchecked expansion, as the good senator would have intimated. She also spoke about sort of no plan. Before the election, we would have released a blueprint for change that says very specifically that from coming out of COVID, where the Bahamas had very little international engagement, that upon coming to office, that the PLP intended to reverse that we would be strong and robust in our international engagement, that we would reach out to friends across the world, and that we would expand our diplomatic presence across the world. So the two tenets of her speech essentially debunked there, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you for your point of clarification.
Well, I think it was a point
I'm
of
sorry,
order.
interruption. Yeah.
Okay, because I would like to have a point of
Order.
clarification.
I'm
Madam.
sorry. Thank you for your point of order. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam
Please proceed.
President.
Yes.
As a point of clarification, I would like to note that I raised sequential questions, and I did assert that perhaps they do know, which he's saying that they do, but I said that the Bahamian people have a right to know, and I do not know as a Bahamian citizen what those reasonings and all of the other details that he outlined are that justify the missions in certain countries and in certain cities. And so, Madam President, if my good colleagues on the other side would be so helpful as to provide such data to us, then we would be well informed, and so would the Bahamian people.
Thank you. Thank you for your point of clarification. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable J. Ann Major.
Madam President, it is a pleasure to be in this chamber for the first time. I echo everyone's sentiments who've come before me in extending a Happy New Year to all of my colleagues, and as well extending a thank you to the Ministry of Works for their hard work in getting us back into the chamber. Of course, it is a pleasure to rise today to offer my contribution to the Foreign Services Bill and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill, two significant legislative updates designed to modernize and enhance the governance structure and operations of our foreign services and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs by addressing gaps in the existing legislative framework and aligning with contemporary diplomatic practices. Madam President, before I get into my contribution, I would like to take a moment to recognize the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Jerusa Ali, and the Foreign Service Officer who is currently with us today. I think everybody recognized their presence earlier, and I wanted to do that as well. I also would like to take a moment to highlight the work of the Maritime and Oceans Affairs Bureau of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and to congratulate them on a successful year of impactful initiatives that continue to strengthen the Bahamas' position in the global maritime arena. As a director of the Bahamas Maritime Authority, an attorney who practices in the maritime field, and someone who's committed to seeing our maritime industry grow and thrive, I'm particularly pleased to see the Bureau's commitment to advancing the country's maritime interests. The Bureau's work in securing the Bahamas' role in key treaties, specifically the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty, its capacity building efforts and negotiations and international collaboration on maritime boundaries underscores the importance of a thriving and resilient maritime industry. I say to the entire team at the Bureau, well done on a very successful and outstanding year, and I thank you for your dedication to safeguarding our blue economy. And I look forward to seeing the continued success of the Bureau in 2025 and beyond. Turning now to the matter at hand, the Foreign Services Bill of 2024 and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill of 2024, which collectively aim to repeal and replace the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, establish a Department of Foreign Service, provide structure and guidelines to the administration of foreign service, and establishing the Al Ray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs to ensure the highest standard of training for our foreign service officers. Madam President, the Foreign Service Bill of 2024 brings much-needed structure, professionalism, and oversight to the Bahamas' foreign service operations, and I applaud the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs for leading the charge in bringing this vital reform to fruition. Madam President, as it has already been stated, a key feature of the bill is the establishment of the Department of Foreign Services as a body corporate for the administration of foreign services. As a body corporate, we all know it can acquire and dispose of its own real estate, it can enter into contracts, it can sue and be sued in its own name, operate its own bank accounts, and what have you. The bill also clearly outlines the ranks and staffing requirements for the department, again establishing a very clear organizational structure. From the support and clerical staff up to the Director General who will head the department, descriptions for each role and rank and function will be provided, and existing foreign service officers will be assessed against the qualification requirements of the new rankings. With this defined new structure, foreign service officers now have a clearly defined career path within the Department of Foreign Services. Just as a career path for someone in the public services to become a permanent secretary, you can have foreign service officers now aiming to become the Director General, ambassadors, or even Deputy Director General. The Director General, who will be appointed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, will be responsible for all matters relating to the Foreign Service, including establishing, promoting, and advancing foreign policy and advising the Minister on all related and technical matters. The first schedule of the bill outlines the specific powers, duties, and functions of the Director General, some of which include being a technical advisor to the Minister on foreign policy issues and being responsible for the technical direction of the department, providing briefings to the public on foreign service matters and policy issues relating to the Foreign Service, and also managing and organizing professional development and training of foreign service officers. The Director General will also be the chief advisor to the Foreign Service Committee, which is the body responsible for providing recommendations to the Prime Minister and the Minister on appointment of persons to the Foreign Service as ambassador, High Commissioner, or any other principal representative of the Bahamas in another country. This committee would be comprised of a retired career diplomat at the ambassador level, the chairman of the Public Service Commission, a certified HR professional, an attorney with at least 10 years' experience and qualification at the Bahamas Bar in international affairs, a certified public accountant who's registered with the Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants, and 2 other persons with knowledge and experience in international affairs. In addition to the Foreign Services Committee, the bill establishes the Foreign Service Appeal Tribunal to hear appeals from employees who are dissatisfied with any decisions made by the Foreign Service Committee, ensuring a structured grievance redressal mechanism. The tribunal is chaired by a sitting or retired justice of the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal, and shall comprise a retired permanent secretary, a person with knowledge and experience in the Foreign Service, each of whom must be appointed by the minister. Madam President, the introduction of the Department of Foreign Service, the Foreign Service Committee, and the Appeal Tribunal helped to promote transparency and accountability in appointments and dispute resolutions within the Foreign Service. It represents a shift towards more structured governance within the Foreign Service, which is not currently detailed in the existing legislation. Madam President, we've heard that the bill also establishes the Al Ray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs, a training center for the training of all foreign officers and foreign service officers in the Department of Foreign Affairs. As such, it facilitates the continuous and consistent training and development of foreign service officers at all ranks and levels, so we have a highly skilled and professional foreign service. The Institute will help to hone the necessary hard skills of foreign service officers, such as analytical skills, negotiations, strategic thinking, and writing skills, as well as those soft skills like simply interacting with diplomats, conversational skills, and demonstrating poise on the national stage. Through proper training and development, we are ensuring that our foreign service officers are equipped to be well-rounded when they represent the Bahamas on the global stage. Madam President, I pause to reflect on the invaluable contribution of Mr. Ramsey, who many of us in here have recognized as a highly regarded, esteemed, and very influential foreign service officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who sadly lost his life in 2019 at the young age of 29. At this young age, his impact on the ministry continues to be felt and served as an example for other young people that they too can make a big impact and a big difference in our country. I only wish his parents were alive to witness the honor of having the training center named after their son. Madam President, I recall that the former Prime Minister and current member for Kalani in the other place a few weeks ago, in discussing the Institute, questioned whether names of other foreign service officers were considered. Madam President, in no way do I want to take away or disregard any of the foreign service officers that he would have mentioned or that my members today have mentioned, the members of the opposition today mentioned. But I do want to beg the question, why didn't you do it during your term? Yeah, why didn't you do it during your term? Both the former Prime Minister as well as the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, my good Senator Henfield, mentioned George Stewart, who I'd remind everybody was honored in 2022. He wasn't overlooked. He was honored in 2022. Everyone here today from the opposition has mentioned Alma Adams. We've mentioned the name of Marilyn Zonical, another member who was honored with the Foreign Service Award by the Christie administration. It seems governance always is simpler from the spectator's seat. I mean, this is hindsight diplomacy at its best. I wish to remind the Bahamian people, however, of what did happen under the last administration, when my good Senator Henfield served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Go ahead. You're the wicked.
More than $500,000 was spent to furnish the ambassador's official residence in Brussels, which may have been a little bit palatable if it wasn't during the pandemic and on the tails of Hurricane Dorian, when Bahamians were struggling without jobs, without homes, struggling to keep their children in school, struggling to put food on the table. I believe the final figure spent on the residence was somewhere around $614,516.14. Give or take $1 or two, give or take. And they asking about school fee. I'm sure the Bahamian people recall how the $19,000 rug, the $14,000 lamp, and the $14,000 mirror, 14,000, dominated the headlines when those final figures were revealed by the Honorable Minister Keith Bell. Like my good Senator Seymour said just a short time ago, it's a matter of priorities.
Yes.
And so when the country is in the throes of the pandemic and coming off the tails of Dorian, the priority was a mirror for $14,000. It's a matter of priorities, right? Madam President, it was also under my good Senator Henfield as the former Minister of Foreign Affairs that the ministry was accused of mishandling the foreign aid issued as Dorian relief. He said accused. You can look it up. But I'm glad that the good senator just today acknowledged that hindsight is 20/20. It's funny how vision miraculously clears up once you are no longer in the driver's seat. Just a few weeks ago in the other place, the leader of the opposition expressed his support for these bills, yet him and his other members of the opposition proceeded to vote against it. So, Madam President, I say we, and by we I mean the Bahamian people. We should take all criticisms from the opposition with a grain of salt, because when it comes to the opposition, we must remember to watch what they do and ignore what they say. I am, however, glad today to see that the members actually did partake in the debate of the bills, unlike my good Senator Seymour, who went a little off track, but nonetheless. I'm glad that the Bahamian people were not deprived once again of a thought-provoking discussion on the important legislation. Madam President, a well-crafted foreign service policy ensures that the Bahamas remains competitive, secure, and influential in global affairs while safeguarding its national interests. In this administration's blueprint for change, we outlined a comprehensive approach to enhancing the Bahamas foreign services, focusing on diplomatic training, honoring service, and upholding principles of good governance. And with these bills, we are delivering on that promise. With that being said, Madam President, I give my full support to the Foreign Services Bill and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill. I thank my members for their invaluable debate today, and I wish God blessings on the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you. You need to slap up.
Thank you, Senator J.Ann Major, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Reuben Ramming.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I still, prayer is a good place to be. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm not being human. It's good to see you again after this long break, and to make my brief contributions to the matter at hand. I would have had the privilege of spending my tenure under the previous administration in collaboration with Senator Darren Handfield at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And it was a very enlightening experience. I want to give profound respect and regards to the Foreign Service officers that I would have served with at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They're not unlike the clerk at a House of Assembly, you know. New people comes in, they take charge, and they become heads of different things. But the wind beneath their wings are the persons who keep the fundamentals of the ministry going. Those career foreign service officers. It's amazing at how powerful they are, not just because of their positions afforded to them by their jobs and portfolios, but by the network of relationships that many of them would have built over the years. Because in diplomacy, many times the real work is not done by the figureheads, but the true grit and unraveling of discrepancies is done as it relate to the quality of success that is obtained and credited to governments and administrations because of the knowledge of foreign service officers and their connections with back channels and understanding each other that allows them to sometimes cut through the minutia and be able to call a friend and say, listen here, what's the deal on this, man? And get the information done. It requires loyalty and selflessness. And for those of us who call ourselves Christians begin to understand truly what it means when he said you are the ambassador of Christ, you are not your own. Because the foreign service officers must realize that when they represent themselves at all times, even in casual settings, that they are representing the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. They're not representing themselves. They're like our own version of the Secret Service because they must understand that even in casual conversations, you carry the responsibility and the protection of the information, the sources, and the secrets of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. It is not always just a glam and glitter kind of situation. We have had many foreign service officers who I find to be unsung heroes. I would have said many times over the years that people have not really regarded or may not know sufficiently regard the effectual work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We see tourism and we calculate cruise ship visitors, stopover visitors, and we accredit that. We see the Ministry of Works and we calculate roads and everything else, and we say, okay, that's what they do. We see agriculture, and when we find that there's produce moving and things happening, we could attribute to that. But foreign service is a very unique thing. Because our number one industry being tourism, number two being banking, financial services, et cetera, would not have the tractions that they need to create and to have those function if it was not for those same treaties and negotiations that would have happened internationally on a governmental level that allows for foreign trade and different negotiations to happen that facilitate the things that we take for granted. We understand when we have issues of blacklisting, et cetera, we get to the point, and thus the reason why we set up Geneva, which everyone is criticizing, it is in Geneva, so that we can be able to in Brussels, for us to be able to more readily address the urgent need for us to fight against this constant menace of blacklisting that we have to address at all turns repeatedly in our country, many times to our disadvantage just to stay in the game. The thing about it is, these persons are real unsung heroes. For those of us who understand the struggle of the diplomatic corps, it requires a lot of give and take. I remember when I think it was Taiwan built the Kendall G.L. Isaac Gymnasium, and then we decided to go with China, and we got to start the stadium. You know, because these things carry very sensitive and very important strategic placement of support globally, many of which may not have direct bearing on us in some instances, but it creates leverage in that because we have seat on many of the international significant boards and security commissions, it makes the Bahamas a go-to place for seeking support for those other entities who want to position themselves as global players. So it brings demand to us, whereas we of ourselves in many instances may be seen as maybe not as significant, but because of our placement on the world stage, we find persons having to have conversations with us, if only to gain our support and having votes. As simple as things that we struggle with in terms of a corresponding banking, which is very, very critical for us not to be isolated in our financial services sector, and allows us to do simple things as Visa, MasterCard, and sending monies off to our children in school. All of these link back down to the level of our diplomatic interactions and treaties that we sign. Many of the legislation that we have to pass here, some of which that are unpalatable to the Bahamian people, as a result of accords that we would have signed onto, and some of them, like I said again, we find unpalatable. When I think of our foreign service officers, and from my experience in dealing with them, I look and I see their value. I value them, and I use this example as the U.S. have for their fighter pilots. That was not more appreciated than during the time of Pearl Harbor. We saw that one country, mainly Japan, they had their pilots up, and under their policy, and you know of the kamikaze pilot, they tell them you go up and you make your kill and be killed. But the U.S. has a very interesting thing. They train their pilots, and if a pilot gets shot down, they go move heaven and earth to get that pilot back, because what they do is they invest in their pilot, and they train them and develop them. But then you found that the Japanese had their pilots that were disposable. So one come up, and they got to the point whereas they trained a pilot to take off and not even to land, because they were not supposed to come back. Our foreign service officers and the experience that they build far exceed the value, in my opinion, of even their salaries. And when you have foreign service officers that have a wealth of knowledge and diplomatic experience, they are pivotal to our government in understanding the currents and the ebbs and the flows of international diplomacy, trade, and business. They are tremendous assets. And I stand with all the names that would have been mentioned for and current in appreciation of their service to the nation. I remember coming on as the new High Commissioner to CARICOM, freshly minted and appointed with the authority to represent the government and the Prime Minister in his interests, but yet walking into places that I've never been before. But it was because you've had foreign service officers that you can trust, who you know is not, their interest is not focused on the party that formed the government, but on the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, who made it so that someone who would not have had the experience in the diplomatic world was able to move gracefully and be a credit to his nation, riding on the backs of their experience. Having to listen to someone they had to train, having to do the documentations and all the briefings for someone to present that they turn up the midnight oil for, and yet had the graciousness once the presentation was delivered successfully, to give a round of applause as if that was them doing it. I value those people for what they have done. And I respect them even to this day. I respect their teamwork and how they pull it together. I've watched the environment in foreign affairs, and I cannot call it perfect, but it's still working, but it's definitely not perfect. I began to mourn when I began to understand the value of those people who would have gone before who understood the details, who, when we're sitting down with briefings, could call off names of their heads, phone numbers of their heads, and relate stories to the prime minister of their heads, to be able to guide him in making decisions because they were so immersed in their job. I was actually pleased to understand and to hear in the lower house that there is now a greater appreciation of moving back to the rotation system, because the prolonged services had begun to deteriorate the quality of the foreign service experience in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that degradation was becoming glaringly clear in the operation. I think I might have heard maybe Senator Pisstock articulate about the concerns of political patronage in the environment. And that is true, because I have seen and I have witnessed, and it's still going on today, because you know when you're in it, and you know it, where political appointees come there, and because they have their level of appointment, they fail to be gracious enough to show respect to the senior service officers who would have been there. And many times, truth be told, a lot of embarrassment had to be captured and stopped, because these novices lean to their own understanding and forsake the experience, the vast experience of those who had that diplomatic rotation over the years, and it had diminished what was going on. The attitude was, you know, my MP bring me here. No. The Foreign Service is almost akin to our military service. I remember beforehand the struggle was to actually work the Foreign Service and separate them from the public service because of their unique needs and their vicissitudes. I was concerned when I sometimes learned about even the level of insurance and protection for some of our Foreign Service officers when they travel to different places, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was hoping, and maybe it is somewhat in the intent, because the regulations have not yet been either tabled or fully drafted, that it goes down deep into the nitty-gritty of the needs of our Foreign Service officers while they are on the ground, things that will protect them, their families, their health, et cetera, and move it to a new level. I also celebrate those career Foreign Service officers whose life had revolved around it, because they have kept the Bahamas on the cutting edge. Ministers come, ministers go. Politician comes, politician go. But the anchor of consistency is those persons who have been serving. So for all of them, again, as I have before, I acknowledge them, and I thank them for their service towards the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and I thank you for your service towards me. Reuben Ramming, I respect you, and I appreciate you for all that you have done, hands down. You know, much could be said about our civil service that is true and is blatantly terrible. But boy, there's those 40% who keep us together. And I don't ever want us to ever get to the point to forget that. The wind beneath our wings. I was so impressed, and I know during under our tenure, the PSs, which the bill seemed to, well, we could talk about that stuff in the bill later on. A lot of them had a deep background in foreign service. Senator Hansfield mentioned Peter DeVoe Isaac and P.S. Shirley, and also Rhoda Jackson, and everybody know, well, we so used to call her DG Saren, Brandon Haylock, Sheila Carey. You know, man, these people are powerhouses, and I have to call their name with a smile, because when you see people of that caliber, and that's why when the bill lists about qualifications, et cetera, I wonder if people really appreciate the level of qualification experience you have to really function at top level in those positions that is spoken to in this bill. Now, my concern with this bill on the whole, it does, in my opinion, look rough, look rushed. It looked as if it's going to take some time when implemented, maybe by the absence of the regulations and because of some of the inherent conflict which the bill itself obviously admits to by leaving latitude of some things having to really stay in place and die as other things come in place because of the transition in the bill and the movement of the bill and the switching of the bill from a foreign service, foreign affairs ministry, which was more encompassing to a foreign service. It's going to be interesting over the next year, because we're going into election, to see how quickly that settles down, because I really believe that's going to be a major determination as to whether the bill will remain, these policies will remain as is, as opposed to probably having to be readjusted later on. So the quicker all the I's can be dotted and T's can be crossed so that these things can be smoothed out, will go a very, very long way. So the bill to me seems to be incomplete, less thorough, and a bit rushed. I can see where the intent is, but in and of itself, it needs to work it out. But the administration, under the leadership of Frederick Mitchell, the Foreign Affairs Minister, that would be their responsibility to do so. A lot of things had been asked today. Even recently by our newest senator, whom I prophesied to her jokingly but yet respectfully. I said, I sent some Beantown woman inside of you. And when Beantown woman catch a fire, so she came out strong, and I enjoyed listening to her. But there was a question I was asked as relate to the Honoré Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs. And it was asked by several. And then it was followed up, the question was asked, why y'all didn't do it when y'all was in power? And that's a very interesting question. Let me tell you what we did do when we were in power, and I was there. We staffed, we upgraded, and we put special emphasis on the training of the foreign service officers under this very same institution that was established, I believe, under the PLP. Interestingly, y'all didn't name it when you started, eh? And we didn't name it when we were building it, eh? You know the interesting thing between the PLP and the F&M? We started a 52-week program, and it's practical. We call it 52-week because it was designed to be 52 weeks of training and interaction with a base salary, after which you prove yourself, you could be integrated into either the government ministry or the public or the private sector that the program had you in. And it was called the 52 weeks. What is it called now? Professional engagement. The professional engagement program. You see the difference? 52 weeks because it's a 52 weeks, then they take the 52 weeks and call it now the professional engagement program. You're good for pretty names. But maybe one party is just simply more practical. But you asked about the fact, because it's a 52 weeks program. And so now it's a professional engagement program. Now here it is now, the debate that they're throwing out, why you didn't name it after Mr. Ramsey. I'm going to ask, it was asked, why you didn't do it when you come. Why you didn't do it or name it when you come. The interesting question, and the fair question is, ask yourself a question. If unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, if Mr. Ramsey had not passed, would it have been named after him? No, We're talking about the fact of the name. You know, let me show you something that's very interesting, you know. And this is the only reason why. No, he doesn't. Anybody who says something.
Chair, can I send the Honorable Jan Major? What is the nature of your interruption?
Madam President, I just want to rise to correct something that was said by the honorable member. He said I asked the question of why they didn't name the training center after Al Ray Ramsey. That was not the question. I don't think that was the question raised by either of my members on this side. It was a question of why didn't you name it after anybody who you guys have, who the opposition has constantly recognized over the last several weeks. Because the question came by the the former Prime Minister as to whether other names were considered. And so my question was, why didn't you name the training center after these names that were considered? Not why didn't you name it after Mr. Ramsey?
Thank you.
The thing about it is, I said it early exactly why it was not named when it was first done after anyone. It was not named after we was rebuilding and populating and getting it up and going and functioning. And it is named now, and it's a fair question. It is named now, is being named in honor of Mr. Ramsey after his passing. Is that that correct? That's the facts of the matter. I mean, what's the issue is the facts of the matter. And I'm sure his parents, everybody and us, all right, and this is a sincere attempt. Had he lived, it would have been unlikely. He is being honored because in his passing. It's just a fundamental thing. But let me show you something that is interesting. And no, that's straightforward. Don't put your imputation on it. It is what it is. Now here it is. It is what it is. It is what it is. So here it is, Madam President. We have a cultural thing in our country. When we move around and we see Simpson Pen for girls, you understand that. When we fly into LPI A with Cylinden, Oscar Pindon, we understand that. Carlton Francis, Ryan McPhee, Aaron Bailey, Doris Johnson. Everybody is deserving of honor, you know. And the question was asked by persons, and many things, even when Senator Enfield spoke, he said, this is what persons was asking. We represent the thoughts of people. But let me show you something that I read that I thought was very interesting, and this is why I was asking, because I was listening to it, to the debate from the lower house, and I listen here now, and I wanted to hear, without any prejudgment, a clearly articulated statement as to the why and the purpose of the naming, and in context of everything that everybody seemed to agree with, that there are a lot of good persons around. So I was listening. And I appreciate the youth. I appreciate the short tenure that he would have had with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and how well he served during that time. I appreciate the many different languages, and we have many other persons who, that's a needed tool in the Foreign Service. But I was listening to it, Madam President, against the backdrop of an official statement that the Prime Minister had made in November 2nd, 2023. And we're in 2025 now, and this name is now just, with the passing of this bill, will be formally put in force. And this is what caused me to ask for greater clarity, maybe in the wrap-up, Minister Alkidas can help me see it, as to the purpose of the intent. This is the official statement of Prime Minister Davis on the passing of former Senator Alma Adams. This is something that I was really hoping to hear as it relates to Mr. Ramsey. I ain't for or against, this is what I was hoping to hear. Something similar to this. And I said, oh, okay, I totally got it. His statement says, "It is with a profound sense of loss and deep sorrow that my wife Anne-Marie and I, along with a grateful nation, mourn the passing of former Senator Alma Adams. Senator Adams served the Bahamas with distinction and unyielding dedication, not only as a senator, but as a venerable diplomat and a consummate educator. Her tenure as Consul General in Miami and Ambassador to Cuba stands as a testament to her commitment to further the interests of our country and strengthen our international alliances. As a founding chancellor, and the name is here, of the Bahamas Alway Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs, she molded the minds that will continue to shape our nation's diplomatic future. Alda Adams was more than a public servant. She was a loving mother, a devoted grandmother, a stalwart in our community, meaning the PLP community. Her contributions to the Progressive Liberal Party and her unwavering faith as a member of St. Agnes' congregation showcased the breadth of her commitment of service. Her wisdom and counsel will be sorely missed by her colleagues in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, by those she guided through her invaluable teachings, and by the many whose lives she touched. This reminds me of a statement in the Bible that says, when you worship the creature instead of the creator. This is what the Prime Minister is saying about the creator of the institution, yet in the same breath, giving somebody else the honor of the thing she created and the people she motivated. You see my contradiction here now? So it doesn't matter what you choose. It's just a personal thing. And it's not a discount, and just in light of, let me finish my statement, Mr. Madam President. It's just in light of
Point of order.
powerful the words are of,
Senator, we have a
the
point of
standard.
order on the floor, so I must take the point of order.
Okay.
Madam President, just a point of order. I really did try and sit to very uncomfortably listen to, you know, the comparisons that he's trying to make. But the point of order I'll make is that he's factually wrong in stating that Alma Adams created the Institute. The Institute was created by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs before Ambassador Adams took the seat as chancellor. She was the founding chancellor, and as the founding chancellor, she was very instrumental in creating the curriculum. I would have known personally both Alray and Miss Adams, who I had great respect for and who was a mentor of mine. And I'll just point out something that Minister Mitchell would have said in his contribution in the House. Part of what he stated, in complete contradiction of what the senator intimated, is that the Institute isn't named after Mr. Ramsey because of his death or because of his youth. It was named because of his contributions and the respect he had within the ministry, and to memorialize his contributions. He also made the statement that in doing this, his hope is to show, just as with, and I can quote him if you wish, but just as with athletes and other young people who have great achievements, that you do not have to wait until an advanced age for your country to honor and recognize you. I made the point in my contribution that it doesn't assist anyone in pinning generations against each other. Everyone can equally, I'm correcting his misstatement. I'm correcting his misstatement. Everyone can be honored equally, Madam President, and it's very uncomfortable
I'm listening
the
to him.
way in which he is couching his argument. So I just wanted to correct his statements on the record.
Senator Ruben Rami.
Madam President, I read verbatim what the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the leader of the Breakfast Liberal Party, said about, as a tribute to a senior person. Everything he said as it relate to, accomplishment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All I simply was read the Prime Minister. His point of order is against the Prime Minister. No, it's really that. It's point of order. And so madam,
Wait,
I
wait.
read.
Senator Raming. Senator Raming, you quoted from the statement that from the press release after Ms. Adams passed away. Do you have that at the table?
Yes, I will table it.
Do you have it now? Because I think
No, I have it now.
that will clarify the point that Senator Griffin was making with respect to her being a founding chancellor of the institute and not
the
finding
statement-
the institute.
If I may, the statement says, again, as a founding chancellor for an
And that's his
institute,
point.
for the institute to start running as an institute, the chancellor was in place, need to be in place, and the chancellor was fundamental in the formation of the whole institute. And that's being credited in other place. We're not going to discount from the lady.
No,
That is
that's-
why, regardless of that, my point is this. The very hey, it's not my opinion. I'm agreeing with the honor that the Prime Minister gave to her. And all I'm simply saying, I'm not even disagreeing with what you want to do with other persons. It's just simply me saying that I've heard honor and reflection as it relates to this. And the standard practices of anything that we do in this country. Why is the law institute name, or slip my name? No, the law, so Eugene Depuch. Everything has its reasoning and rhymes and its meanings. So when we get to the point of, say, because we recognize invaluable contributions, all I simply read was a invaluable contribution as related to persons, and when I read the details of this, and I'm just simply saying, help me understand. All right? And that is a privilege of mine to ask a question. And unlike what was done recently, when somebody asks a question, it's not a point of order or a question. You just give an answer to a question. There's a point of order to a statement. There's no law for anybody to ask a simple question to anyone. And so all I read, and you can have this, and I'm tabling this right now, is exactly what the Prime Minister said himself. So with that, I just want to make sure that the value of everything that we do is acknowledged. All right. You. The good thing about this, Madam President, is they may not, but there is a tent. They may not like it, but who cares? It is my question. It is the Prime Minister's statement, and it's now on the record. With that, I rest.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I rise this afternoon to contribute to this bill for an act to establish. Sorry. Thank you very much, Madam President. I rise this afternoon to contribute to this bill for an act to establish the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, and establishment of the Aldray Ramsey Institute. Madam President, this is a good day. First, I want to start by thanking former Prime Minister Perry Christie, who appointed me to the Foreign Service back in 2013, Madam President. At the time of my appointment, I was considered the youngest Consul General in the history of the Bahamas, which in itself was a great honor, Madam President. His belief in me at the time was greater than the doubt of others. It was such a good move, Madam President, that I can tell you that in 2015, the former Prime Minister, Hubert Minnis, he had an opportunity to visit Atlanta, where I was able to take him around and talk to him about the Foreign Service. And when he became Prime Minister, he himself realized that a young person could do the job, and even though it wasn't his first choice to appoint a younger person than I was, he appointed Astra and Bristol Roll, which was a young person, like I said, so the standard was set. He followed suit, and so I even thank him for that. Madam President, it was on that basis that, despite us being from different political organizations, I was cheering for her to do well because it set a standard, Madam President, that young people can serve our country and serve it well. Madam President, like so much of the general public, I was unaware of the complexity, the reach and scope of the Foreign Service. Technical officers who served both here at home and abroad require a delicate balance of skill, diplomacy, strategic thinking, and an unwavering commitment to the advancing of the Bahamian foreign policy objectives in an ever-evolving global environment. Foreign Service officers, Madam President, must possess an acute awareness of international relations and in-depth understanding of geopolitical landscapes and the ability to anticipate and navigate diplomatic challenges with agility and finesse. In the speech from the throne, Madam President, in 2021, the Governor General underscored the government's commitment to a blueprint for change, a policy framework designed to align the Bahamas foreign policy with the core principles of democracy, human rights, and non-interference. This vision, Madam President, emphasized strengthening engagement with the international community while ensuring a non-strategic and deliberate approach to participation in regional and international organizations. The government also pledged to fortify maritime security and to seek collaborative solutions to pressing transitional challenges such as migration, climate change, and economic development. Madam President, with the introduction and passage of the Foreign Service Bill, will serve as a manifestation of that promise. This, Madam President, transformative legislation instrument is not merely an administrative formality. It is an affirmation of the Bahamas' commitment to an elevated and modernized foreign service apparatus. This bill, Madam President, seeks to deepen our relations with bilateral and multilateral partners, enhance the promotion of trade and investments, and bolster the provisions of technical assistance. Most significantly, Madam President, it lays the foundation for the establishment of a Department of Foreign Service, an independent institution that will streamline democratic operations and amplify the impact of the Bahamas on the global stage. Moreover, the creation of the Bahamas Alray Institute of Foreign Affairs signifies a cultural investment in the intellectual and professional development of our diplomatic corps. Madam President, I don't want us to get distracted by a name, but understand the importance and what it does. All right? This bill marks an inflection point in the management of the Bahamas Foreign Affairs, as it provides an operational framework that is attuned to the distinguishes of modern diplomacy. It is a bold step forward, Madam President, one that acknowledges the dynamic and multifaceted nature of global democracy while ensuring our foreign service officers are adequately equipped to represent the nation with dignity, competence, and strength. I have experienced, Madam President, firsthand some of the challenges and frustrations that foreign services officers face. Many of our country's best and brightest face challenges, Madam President, with career development and upward mobility within the public service while serving abroad. Madam President, I am profoundly gratified by the work that has been done to this bill thus far. This bill, Madam President, is historic. It is the first of its kind since our democratic dispensation, building upon the groundwork laid by my government's 2014 proposal. However, this bill is not a mere extension of its predecessor. It is an involved and sophisticated blueprint that addresses critical issues such as the selection of caliber of diplomats, the role of youth in democracy, and the avoidance of overlapping roles with sister agencies. In crafting the landmark legislation, Madam President, the government has adopted a consultative approach, engaging a diverse range of stakeholders, including, Madam President, former ambassadors, foreign ministers, think tanks, academics, experts in international relations, non-governmental agencies, business leaders, and labor representatives. This collective experience has enhanced the bill, Madam President. Lots of work has gone into it. This bill ensures that it is not merely a bureaucratic instrument, but a dynamic tool for the advancing of the Bahamas' foreign policy objectives in an increasingly interconnected world. Madam President, we often romanticize the Foreign Service, envisioning a career of glamorous receptions, high-profile meetings, and diplomatic privileges. However, Madam President, the reality is far more nuanced. Diplomacy, There are countless instances, Madam President, where our diplomats have found themselves in violent regions, narrowly escaping political violence, natural disasters, or even civil unrest. It is therefore heartening that this bill is not solely created on policy. This bill prioritizes people, Madam President. For decades, the Foreign Service has functioned as a loosely defined entity with the broader public service. Professional evaluation and career progression were often guided by generalized criteria that failed to recognize the specialized skills required for diplomatic service. Consequently, Madam President, Foreign Service officers frequently found themselves in stagnant career trajectories, lagged behind their counterparts in governmental sectors. This bill rectifies that long-standing oversight, Madam President, by establishing a distinct career path for foreign service officers, one that acknowledges their unique contributions and ensure that their professional growth is compensated with their dedication and expertise. Madam President, I want to pause to again thank some individuals who would have served with me, even before me, and in terms of some mentors, Madam President, in the likes of Ed Bethel, Alma Adams, and many more. But also, I want to also recognize the officer that I had the opportunity to work with, Ms. Monique Vanderpool Wallace, and Mia Norwich. Both were excellent officers, and I was able to learn a lot from them, Madam President. Madam President, this bill guarantees that public officers transferring to foreign service will retain all previous accused benefits, including tenure, allotments, and pension entitlements. This provision migrates concerns about career mobility and ensures that our best and brightest talents are incentivized to serve diplomatic corps without fear of career disadvantage, Madam President. As I highlighted in the earlier, Madam President, this bill's most groundbreaking feature is its establishment of the Alrie Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs. This institute will serve as the premier training ground for our diplomats, equipping them with intellectual and practical tools necessary to navigate the interactive web of international diplomacy, Madam President. A well-trained foreign service is the backbone of any nation's diplomatic success. And this institution will ensure that Bahamian diplomats are not only well prepared, but also highly competitive on the global stage. For this, I also thank the committee, Madam President. Furthermore, this bill incorporates previous for reviews of remuneration, promotions, and allowances, ensuring that foreign services remain an attractive and rewarding career. Madam President, in the past, cohorts, 1 in every 3 have ended up leaving Ministry of Foreign Affairs out of frustration, Madam President. I am happy that this bill now, again, and the focus of it, will help us not only to attract more foreign service officers, the best and the brightest, but it will keep them because now they will see a career path. You know, I thank again, I see in the chamber the Director General, and I thank you for your service to country, all that you do, and for the work and effort that your team has put in to a bill such as this, Madam. Thank you so much. The introduction of the Foreign Service Committee, replacing the Public Service Commission, along with the establishment of the Foreign Service Appeals Tribunal, will provide essential oversight to safeguard the interests of and professional welfare of our diplomats. These measures are designed to enhance motivation, boost morale, and ultimately evaluate productivity within the foreign service. Madam President, like I said earlier, I had the privilege of working with some phenomenal women in the foreign service, engaged as locally staffed and diplomatic staff. My career diplomatic officer, Ms. Monique Vanderpool, and Mia Ferguson, who I mentioned earlier, were instrumental in guiding my successful term as Consul General. These 2 women, Madam President, who had served for 35 and 12 years respectively in the Foreign Service, are consummate professionals who, despite limitations have served the Bahamas at its highest level, from general diplomatic representation to dealing with Bahamians in distress and emergency situations. They navigated with grace and compassion. While they had both moved on from the service, it is my hope, Madam President, that our collective support of this Foreign Service Bill will be a step in the right direction in retaining the skill and talents that I had the honor of working with. I take this opportunity to thank both of them for their hard work and dedication during my time. Madam President, the role of the Foreign Ministry, is often likened to that of the military. Just as a nation's armed forces are responsible for defending its territory, integrity, diplomats serve as the custodians of its image, alliances, and strategic interests on the global stage. In this context, Madam President, training and continuous professional developments are imperative. The world of diplomacy is fluid, unpredictable, and often unforgiving. In an era characterized by shifting power dynamics, economic uncertainties, and emerging global challenges, our diplomats must be prepared to engage with confidence, adaptability, and intellectual rigor. This bill, Madam President, is not just a legislative document. It is a testament of our unwavering commitment to the principles of effective democracy, national development, and global engagement. It signifies a paradigm shift, Madam President, and in ensuring that the Bahamas is not merely a participant in international affairs, but a formidable and respected voice in global discourse. Madam President, it is in these words that I fully lend my support and unwavering support to this groundbreaking, Madam President, people-centered legislation. Let us seize this moment, Madam President, to evaluate our foreign service, invest in our diplomats, and position the Bahamas as a dynamic and influential player on the world stage. These words, Madam President, I thank you and I support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Randy Rowe, for your contribution as many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Abonnet Ellis.
Thank you, Madam President. February is Heart Month, and I don't just mean romantic affairs of the heart, but it's a time to focus on the most powerful muscle in our bodies. During February, we raise awareness about heart disease and taking steps to improve our cardiovascular health. Think of it like a second attempt at that New Year's resolution to do 30 minutes of moderate exercise every other day. This February, I encourage all Bahamians to make heart-healthy choices and to encourage our loved ones to do the same. Small changes can make a big difference. February is also a great month for birthdays. Our Senate colleague, Senator Maxine Seymour, celebrates her birthday on Friday. Can we bang the table, please? Senator Seymour, I wish you a very happy birthday week filled with love and laughter. Tomorrow is also my sister's 40th birthday. Viola is my little sister, my best friend, and my most trusted advisor. For her, I would make the impossible possible, and I am grateful that God has gifted me the most wonderful role of being her big sister, and in my own mind, her protector. Happy birthday, V. And a happy birthday to all February babies. And now on to the heartbroken Madam President. I offer my heartfelt condolences to the families of MCM Louise Bosfield, Willamay Fernander JP, Tracy Sands, Aubrey Tucker Jr., Elder Leslie Brown, Antoinette Smith, Albert Pinder, Eloquenia Bastian, and Ludel Theophilus. Madam President, we are debating two pieces of legislation which are intended to modernize the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and our Foreign Service. The Foreign Service is crucial for small countries like the Bahamas because it helps to strengthen our national interests, promote economic development, and strengthen diplomatic ties. Embassies and consulates provide assistance to Bahamians traveling, studying, and working abroad in cases of emergencies, legal issues, or crises. The Foreign Service helps to attract foreign investment, promote tourism, expand trade opportunities, and develop partnerships to support economic growth. As a small nation, the Bahamas relies on its Foreign Service to maintain strong relationships with larger countries and international organizations. The Bahamas participates in regional organizations like CARICOM and the Organization of American States to strengthen collective security and policy initiatives. The Foreign Service is essential for the Bahamas to protect its sovereignty, enhance our economic prosperity, and navigate global challenges effectively. Foreign Service officers are trained diplomats who represent their government's official positions abroad. In doing so, they explain and often justify their country's actions, whether economic, security, or human rights matters, by framing these actions within a broader narrative of national interests, legal obligations, and shared international values. Their role involves communicating the rationale behind government policies to foreign audiences, which can include controversial decisions. They emphasize the necessity of these actions by citing security concerns, historical context, or legal commitments, and by using carefully crafted diplomatic language intended to reassure our international partners and counteract criticism. Their work is guided by a duty to maintain diplomatic relations and promote national interests on the global stage, and even when those interests are subject to intense international debate. In short, Madam President, I do not envy them. This administration's actions and inactions have no doubt put their diplomacy skills to the test, and none more so than this administration's mixed messages about protecting women and girls. We see it in the unduly lenient plea deals for sexual assaults of women and girls. Last week, a man was sentenced to 5 years for sexually assaulting his 3-year-old twin daughters. The lawyers wanted less, and I am grateful to the court for rejecting that foolishness. They are his flesh and blood, his heirs. They are innocent, too young to fight back. And
Point of order, Madam President.
Yes, Senator Rowe. What's the next?
She's on the roll, and I don't want to think. I just want to know what's relevant.
Thank you, Senator Randy Rowe.
Thank you, Madam President. You may recall that before I got to this point, I spoke about the fact that our Foreign Service officers are charged with the task of explaining our actions to the global community, and that is the relevance.
Thank you, Senator. Please proceed. Thank you.
The lawyers wanted less, and I'm grateful to the court for rejecting that foolishness. They are his flesh and blood, his heirs. They are innocent.
Senators, you're aware that the microphone is not properly working, and I have difficulty hearing us. So if you'd please not speak during this time so that I can properly hear the senator on the floor. Thank you.
They are too young to fight back, and 5 years does not feel like enough punishment for his heinous actions. The maximum sentence for indecent assault is a mere 8 years. We need to increase that. We need to send a clear message that sexual offenses are extremely serious, and the sentences will reflect our non-tolerance for this behavior. And then there was the police officer, a law enforcement officer with a duty to serve, protect, and enforce the laws of this country. He got fined for trying to have sex with a 13-year-old. A fine, Madam President. Less than a month ago, my daughter was 13. Grown men and women have no business engaging or trying to engage in sexual activities with a child. These are our children, our sons and daughters, and they are not being fiercely protected. And then, Madam President, there's this issue of marital rape. In February 2022, Prime Minister Davis said, rape is rape, and the Attorney General drafted legislation to amend the Sexual Offenses Act to reflect this very brave sentiment that rape is rape. But last week, the Attorney General confirmed that there was no political will to pass legislation criminalizing marital rape. Madam President, I refuse to believe that this cabinet believes that it is okay to have sex with someone without their consent. I refuse to believe that this cabinet thinks that someone should not be punished for rape. They are simply scared that some people will not agree with them. The refusal to criminalize marital rape is condemnation of violence against women. Madam President, how are Foreign Service officers supposed to explain that while this administration says all the appropriate things condemning violence against women and girls, its actions have been limited to rushing through a piece of legislation that has barely been implemented and a refusal to criminalize marital rape? Madam President, we were promised a new day with bold, innovative actions, a disruption of the status quo. But why, Madam President, does that not apply to the women that make up more than 50% of our population? Since the Attorney General's comments last week, I've thought a lot about leadership and making tough decisions. Madam President, this is the Progressive Liberal Party that led us to majority rule and on to independence. Surely, Madam President, there was opposition, but they didn't let that stop them. Madam President, this is also the Progressive Liberal Party that legalized numbers, and we certainly know there was opposition to that. Yet, in the face of documented opposition, 60% of voters voted against legalizing numbers. They didn't let that stop them. That PLP administration did what was needed to be done and legalized gaming. But this PLP administration is not so brave. They are scared. It is unacceptable, disgusting, and heartbreaking that the courage to do what is necessary in the face of opposition is limited to financial gain, but is absent when needed to protect the safety and dignity of women. How are Foreign Service officers supposed to explain that to the world community? Madam President, Bahamian women and girls are entitled to a protection that has yet to be provided. We are waiting for a hero, an administration that will protect us and our children. But the time has come for us to rescue ourselves. All observations show that we are in that season. And now, more than ever, we need more women in the rooms where decisions are made. We must step up in large numbers to be candidates in the next general election. It is up to us to step forward and seize the opportunity to implement these long overdue protections. And as I take my seat, Madam President, may God continue to bless you. May you continue to have the courage to advocate for what is right. And may he continue to bless the members of the Foreign Service charged with justifying our actions to the world community. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Michael Bonnet Ellis, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Roll Turner.
Good afternoon, Madam President. Let me say that once again, it is certainly a pleasure to see all of the fellow senators returning back here in 2025. I think this is the first time I'm seeing some of you for the year. God is certainly good. Let's pray that he will continue to be gracious to us and give us many more days to do many of the right things. So firstly, I want to welcome all of you back. It's good to see all of you. Madam President, secondly, as we move, before I get going here, I also want to express condolences because, you know, death is just everywhere. 2 Saturdays ago, we buried another giant in the Grand Bahama community who was Pastor Rufus Cooper. And he was a mild soul, mild gentleman, and he is one of those persons that remind middle-aged men that no matter how hot you think you are, you actually got where you are in many cases because you were able to stand on the shoulders of many who came before you. He was a humble man, really worked hard with his church, really did a lot in his community. And I say this afternoon, once again, to his wife, that I express my condolences from my family to hers. And I also say, once again, that may his soul rest in peace. Now, I know that there has already been a lot said about these bills so far, and as such, I imagine that I don't need to say anything too contentious. In fact, I probably don't need to say very much because most of the bases have been covered. But let me firstly start by saying and indicating that I do support this Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bill 2024 and this Foreign Service Bill 2024. As I looked at it, no doubt there are many meaningful areas that represent a lot of things to those who have and will interact with these services. Madam President, one ought to understand that in a modern and progressive society, we should be advancing on all fronts and in all sectors. The modernization of the foreign affairs sector is a welcomed upgrade for all of us who live outside of the nation's capital. So often when people think of foreign services, they think of passports and visas, and you know, they kind of constrain the thoughts there. But there is so much more. When we look at what we ought to be doing and what we are doing in trade and those types of things, the foreign services clearly has a much broader reach. As a country with thoughtful individuals across various viewpoints, we understand the importance of preparation for any upcoming challenge or any upcoming, and more importantly, opportunity. While I support this bill, let me speak to you in the context of Grand Bahama firstly. And you know, Madam President, because I know that every time the Grand Bahamians stand in this here place, many people want to hear what's happening up north. They want to know what the truth is. Because I tell you, sometimes I look on social media and I wonder where these people are speaking of. You know, I always want folks to realize that whenever it's Senator Russell or myself, whenever we speak here, we bring you the sheer truth. We want you to understand that as we move forward, there's a good sense that what is happening in the northern portion of the Bahamas is certainly going to be pleasing to Bahamians. And if you would allow me a few minutes, I just want to share one or two thoughts here. Most recently, we hosted a group of youngsters from all over the Commonwealth of the Bahamas to a youth conclave on Grand Bahama. The purpose of this was to ensure that young people all over this country know that they have a voice and a voice that can be heard in this government. We met, we listened, we exchanged ideas from these young folks, from young and upcoming professionals. All Bahamians, all as they expressed what their thoughts were on many issues. I ought to declare that there were good meetings that culminated on the first evening with the Deputy Prime Minister speaking and bringing some good news to the folks in Grand Bahama and the rest of the Bahamas. And as it goes in baseball, while the bases were loaded, on the second evening of the event, the Prime Minister spoke, stepped up to the plate, and brought all of those bases home. There were good meetings with great exchanges, and let me tell you, I concluded at the end of the sessions that young folks want us to know that they are ready, that they are willing, and they are certainly able, and are being prepared to ensure that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, from the most southern islands in Inagua, Exuma, Meguana, to Long Island, Andros, Chubkey, and the Berry Islands, Eleuthera, New Providence, Abaco, Bimini, and certainly in Grand Bahama, are ready for the next frontier of success in this country. Madam President, all they needed was a forum for orderly and meaningful dialogue outside of the disguises of a faceless social media platform where so many silly notions are often expressed. I've noticed recently that there has been a lot of comments regarding the status of Grand Bahama today versus the Grand Bahama of many years back, and I'm grateful for that because, as the old folks say, dogs don't bark at parked cars. Now, some are saying it's jumping in Grand Bahama. I've even heard some say it's booming in Grand Bahama. And on the other side, I heard some others saying, well, it's not jumping that much, and maybe it ain't booming. But one thing is for sure, we are moving in the right direction. Madam President, the fact that the Carnival project that we spoke of about maybe 14, 15 months ago is going to be presenting its first phase this year tells us that something's happening in Grand Bahama. The fact that the Grand Bahama Shipyard, their project advances, tells us that things are moving in Grand Bahama. The fact that immigration matters are now under review on Grand Bahama to ensure that Bahamians are put first tells us that things are moving in Grand Bahama. The fact that home repairs in many areas on Grand Bahama continues, and there will be more to come, tells us that things are moving in the right direction on Grand Bahama. The fact that as you drive around the island, you see more new home construction today than I've seen in a very long time tells us that the island is moving in the right direction. The fact that parks and recreation areas are being restored and utilized is an encouraging thing. The fact that hoteliers are expressing their optimism based on current occupancy levels tells us that we are moving in the right direction. The fact that parents can now place their children in the private school or public school of their choice tells us that the island's economy is beginning to move in the right direction. Now, you know, I must declare that I'm sworn to telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth when I come here. But I had a dilemma in my heart today because I saw the member, I must confess, this is the first time I thought it would be good for the member from Abaco not to be here. Because there's a fact that I ought to declare, I'd rather declare it in his absence. But nonetheless, I will declare that. Grand Bahamas, and he has a desire to be called the nation's second city, and I let him live that illusion occasionally. Eh? But hold on. Let me declare this. I don't want to hold this truth back. Let me declare this. Listen, speaking of planes, Grand Bahamas air arrivals had the fastest growth in the past year at 8.7%. Listen. You know, these Abaconians are something else, Madam President. He wants me to publicly declare, and I will do so, that we were only second to Abaco at 11.9%. But we want folks to know all over the Commonwealth of the Bahamas that Grand Bahama is moving in the right direction. These are all positive things. These are all positive growth indicators and reasons to have a mature sense of optimism about the Northern Islands. A few days ago, we heard from the country's leader, Prime Minister Davis, that the focus on delivery of a new developer of the Grand Lucaya Resort continues, and the presentation of the newer airport continues and is still under negotiations. Yes, we are all waiting for the big news, and we expect that to come. But we know, given what we have endured, we would rather have this pace be slow, steady, and sure than to have this pace be fast, mixed up, and not delivered. Madam President, the Foreign Affairs Bill provides a corporate structure to allow the ministry to manage its own affairs far more efficiently. Further, it goes on to allow for a modern era of diplomacy. I like the fact that it creates a more agile and responsive foreign affairs sector, which will certainly benefit the Bahamian people. When I recall that the government has opened and also intends to open missions in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, and the presence of consulates in Toronto, Canada, the Jamaica Thoughts, Trinidad, and the ever excellent presence in South Florida, I am compelled to support this bill. I say to the Prime Minister and his delegation, to our Foreign Affairs Minister and his team, all of those officers, managers, and others associated with these services, please continue to fly all the parts of the world and present this country we love that is known as the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. If you are not present, you're not even a choice. You have to take the news, and you have to take what you have available to the marketplace. Never mind the naysayers, as they will always exist. But yes, I say I, and yes, we all. And your country needs your expertise, and your dedication is certainly appreciated. Madam President, this afternoon, I say today, I stand on my feet as a proud Bahamian, and I do declare that I stand and support these bills, and may God Almighty continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable James Roll Turner. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Hall Keatis.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I want to thank all senators who have contributed to these bills today. I think we've had a very informative debate. Madam President, just briefly, very briefly, to address just a few points that arose during the debate. The one I want to address is the question, there was a question posed in his contribution by Senator Henfield as it relates to the 2014 Foreign Service orders, and he asked if they would remain in effect. And I am advised that the 2014 Foreign Service orders will be amended, and the Foreign Service manuals are being created. And that is a parallel process that is going on. Yes, and yes, and so, and as well, a Foreign Service career path with eligibility requirements, definitions, and duties assigned for each rank is also being created. The other question, Madam President, I think by and large the bills were supported during the debate, was I think one question asked by, a paraphrase asked by Senator Seymour was why so much money being spent, why so many missions? Why are so many missions? Mission here, mission there. Everybody gets a mission. I think a question was why, what justifies it, and what criteria is being used to justify establishing the mission, what objective criteria in terms of numbers, etc. Madam President, I think it was Senator Griffin who detailed the list of the missions that were open in places like Los Angeles, more recently in the United Arab Emirates, as well as Jamaica, Trinidad. The one in Brussels was an older mission. Toronto was recently opened. And there's reason to it, Madam President. When we speak about Los Angeles, you are putting a presence on the west coast of the United States to help to promote our tourism as well as investments. The United Arab Emirates, when we're talking about seeking investment capital and capital in general, we must be able to look to places where that capital is and diversify the sources, Madam President. And so there's a lot of potential for investment coming from the United Arab Emirates in that area of the world. So it's good to have a presence there. Because of the large number of Bahamian students studying places like Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica, Madam President, you want to have your presence there. And
but explain, most of the hemispheric missions of countries are in Jamaica. So why you wouldn't have a full diplomatic presence in Jamaica beyond?
And my AG is assisting me there, saying yes, most of the hemispheric missions, for example, the EU and other missions are in Jamaica, Canada as well. The and again, Madam President, you know, my colleague, Senator Griffin, is doing a lot of work with our Trade Facilitation Committee and our Cost of Living Task Force, and part of that is exploring ways that we can source goods from different destinations, and even within the Caribbean, with a view to still being able to source quality items and get them on our shelves cheaper. And it's part of that mission is looking within the Caribbean at how we can improve trade in that area. So that's very, very important. I think Senator Henfield mentioned, or perhaps it was Senator Ramming. I think Senator Ramming mentioned Brussels and the fact that you need to be there because the OECD is there. And when you're talking about our experience with blacklisting and the ability to have people on the ground in these places where, as Senator Ramming rightly said, a lot of the information and the intelligence goes on in the hallways. And so to be able to have your people there to find out and be aware of what perhaps is coming down the pipe, what considerations are going into these decisions, and to be there, that's very, very important. And it's a credit that you've seen these missions persist over successive administrations. The same in Toronto, Madam President, with the amount of Bahamians studying and now living in Canada. We have the presence in Ottawa, and Toronto takes us more towards the center of the country. The last thing I want to say with that, Madam President, is when we do trade missions sometime for financial services, and we get what they tell us many times is that our competition, like the BVI, actually have physical presence in places like Singapore and Hong Kong. And so that gives them a bit of the edge on the competition for financial services. So presence is important. And so when you're talking about promoting foreign relations, promoting tourism, promoting investments, it's very, very important that you have a presence. Understandably, colleagues as well as Bahamians at large are concerned about priorities and value for money, Madam President, but I would just like to assure them that we are committed to making sure that we do get value for money and a good return on the investments by our outreach. So once again, Madam President, just thank all colleagues for their support of the bill in the debate. And I move for second reading and committal of a bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Alray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs and related purposes.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Michael Halkitis. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Alray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs, and related purposes. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Alray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs, and the related purposes.
For the second reading of bills,
Yes, Madam President, I move for second reading and committal of a bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected matters.
is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected matters. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected matters.
For the second reading of bills?
There are no further second readings, Madam President.
Committee of the Whole.
Madam President, I move that the Senate do resolve itself into a committee of the whole with the Vice President in the chair.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Vice President and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole in the chair. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried.
Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, with respect to a bill for an act to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, administration of the Foreign Service, establishment of the Bahamas Al Ray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs, and related purposes, I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Mr. Chairman, sorry, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 through 16 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 16 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. Clauses 2 through 16 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety, inclusive of the first and second schedule.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill be agreed in its entirety, including the first and second schedule. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect for a bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected purposes, I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now move that clauses 2 through 8 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 8 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. Clauses 2 through 8 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be agreed in its entirety.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill be agreed in its entirety. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the Madam President do now take the chair.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the President do now take the chair. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is carried. Madam President will now take the chair. Madam President, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has examined both bills, having made no amendments to either bill.
Honorable members, the Vice President and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has examined the bills, having made no amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills. Chair recognizes Senator Honorable Michael Alkitis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill to make provision for the establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of the Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Al Ray Ramsey Institute of Foreign Affairs, and related purposes.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to make provision for the establishment,
The Foreign Service.
establishment of the Department of Foreign Service, the administration of Foreign Service, the establishment of the Bahamas Al Ray Ramsey Institute for Foreign Affairs, and related purposes.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Foreign Service Act 2024. For the third reading of bills,
Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected matters.
Second.
it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. As many as in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to provide for the repeal and replacement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Act, Chapter 24, and for connected matters.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Ministry of Foreign Service Affairs Act 2024. For the third reading of bills,
There are none at this time, Madam President.
consideration of House amendments, resolutions, discharge of select committees, notices for future meetings.
Madam President, I renew all notices in the name of the government.
Orders for clerk, adjournment.
Madam President, I move that the Senate at its rising do adjourn sine die.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate at its rising do adjourn sine die. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Final adjournment.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now adjourn. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed. The Senate stands adjourned sine die.